Instead of a candle jar, I'm going to be using an old honey jar since I go through quite a few pots of honey every few weeks, so I wanted to try and find a way to use them. I'm going to be using polyfiller, but one thing you need to realise if you're using polyfiller is that you need to use it in a well ventilated area or use some kind of respirator mask. Also, if you want to do something like have a candle inside this jar, you don't want to do that. Polyfiller is flammable, so it's fine if you're using it just as a decorative jar to hold pencils or paintbrushes, but if you want to do something like have a candle inside, then you want to use something like regular plaster or stone powder. The first thing I'm going to do is cover most of it with a polyfiller, wait for it to dry. Then once it's dry, we're going to start sculpting out the shape of the skull. I'm going to be using a small steel sculpting spatula, but if you don't have something like this, you could get away with using your fingers. Heck, you can get away with using almost any tool. And then what you need is a reference. As it turns out, I have a skull on my kitchen windowsill because it's just one of those things that I find fascinating. But if you don't have a creepy little Yorick skull, then you can just Google an image and have that up on the side just as a reference. And then you want to start sculpting out those basic shapes. You need to imagine the nose a little bit like an upside down heart, and then the eyes are just a little bit of an almond shape, but then it's just small little tweaks, and build up the polyfiller or the plaster, whichever one you use, to layer it around the eyes and the nose. And then for the mouth, it's just a case of scraping out clear lines for teeth shapes just at the very bottom of the jar. Once I've got all the basic shapes sculpted out, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be layering this polyfiller even more around the eyes. I'm going to wait for it to dry a little bit just so that it's a little more malleable, and then I'm going to start moving it around so that it's more dense around the eyes and there's more of a structure to it and it's not so flat. Especially along the brow bone, we're going to bring that up towards the edge of the jar, and then once it's all dry, I'm going to scrape away any of the polyfiller which will have ended up stuck on the glass by the eyes or the nose. And then I'm also going to do exactly the same on the teeth, except this time I'm going to be using a small rubber sculpting tool. Even when it's dry though, it's still quite flat, and I want to have a little bit more of an interesting texture on this thing, or at least make a texture which is a little more visible. So I'm going to be adding different colours. I'm going to be using some of my pan pastels and then just an ordinary C-shaped makeup brush. You could also use an art brush if this is what you prefer. And I'm going to be using brown all along the dips around the eyes, and then also on the inside of the eyes, the nose, the teeth as well. And I'm also going to be adding some lines down the scrape marks on the back, just because if all the details at the front and the back is bland, it's going to look odd. Then I'm going to take a smaller art brush, and then I'm going to do that on places like the teeth, any of the little textures which I've drawn in around the eyes, just to make it look more cracked and worn. Once that's done, I'm just going to spray paint it with a clear gloss, but one of the problems that you're going to have with this is if you spray paint it, as you can see, the glass has gone a little matte. Now if you want to avoid this, what you can do is you can get some blue tack, just stick it on top, and then after you've spray painted it, you can peel that away and you won't have that matte effect. But other than that, you're done.